Today's story is actually quite depressing because today we're going to talk about how, yet again, there is another impediment in Kyle Rittenhouse's way to him enjoying the rest of his life, despite the fact that, like we've said, showed, and exposed multiple different times, Kyle Rittenhouse's case was a complete and utter farce. This person clearly and obviously defended themselves on video. It was caught wire to wire, and despite the left-wing media trying to lie about the case over and over again, there was never anything but a self-defense situation. However, even though Kyle Rittenhouse's case is completely caught on video, even though all of the myths surrounding it have been completely and utterly destroyed, even though people who repeated these myths, like Anna Kasparian repeating the cross-state lines thing over and over again, were made fools of and eventually stopped saying the stupid things, it turns out that's not enough. It turns out there's always more fight to be had because Kyle Rittenhouse right now is being re-victimized by his attackers with civil suits. Now, there's already a civil suit in relation to Anthony Huber, his father, that he filed against Kyle Rittenhouse, but what we're actually going to talk about today is that Gaige Grosskreutz recently submitted an amended complaint related to his case, which, if you'll remember, was actually filed during the time of the trial it was brought up, and he's alleging that Kyle conspired with the police to deprive people of their civil rights because Kyle is an evil white racist who's evil, white, and racist. Now, you might think I'm joking, you might think I'm exaggerating, but I assure you, that's actually in the complaint. In fact, it reads like a dramatic LARPing piece, and it just goes to show you that you can just destroy somebody's life over and over again if they defend themselves, because our system allows the criminals like this to infinitely litigate against you, even if it's in a frivolous manner. Now, we're going to go over this complaint. It's 42 pages. I will link it in the description. We're going to go over the complete and utter lies in it because it needs to be discussed. But before we do that, I just want to thank the members who signed up over at actualjusticewarrior.com/join and remind you that Kyle has a Give, Send, Go to help with the legal expenses for this. That will also be linked in the description, and I just want to say, even though this case might not seem topical or relevant anymore in terms of self-defense, I just want to point out, just because Kyle beat the criminal charges and he's not going to jail doesn't mean that these civil matters, this civil litigation, can't result in him losing his livelihood, ending up paying all these people all this money, and thus undermining the right to self-defense. If the criminals in this case, or the criminals' family members in this case, can extract so much money from you that they leave you destitute, then your right to self-defense is just as violated as if they put you in jail for it, because, again, it sends a message to all would-be defenders out there who follow the law, just like Kyle Rittenhouse, who clearly and obviously followed the law, that they could still come after you legally using the twists and turns and the broken system. So yeah, it's very important that Kyle doesn't pay these people out a dime because they're the scum of the earth, and they're just lying in these complaints.
Marked as exhibit number 62. This is a notice of claim. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Filed on your behalf by your lawyer, right?
That is correct, yes.
Making a notice or telling, among others, the city and county of Kenosha that you would like $10 million. True?
That is correct.
Did you read this?
I did.
So are you aware in this document, you never mentioned that you actually possessed a firearm? You know that?
That is correct.
You left that part out, right?
That is correct.
Judge, I would move 62.
Is there objection?
No.
Proceed.
You then had, shortly thereafter, I want to say in October, I'm going to show you what is Exhibit 63. You have now filed a lawsuit in federal court. Is that right?
That is correct.
Did you read that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. In that document, you again failed to mention that you possessed a firearm. Is that right?
That is correct.
So you, in these documents that you are filing with courts, you are leaving out the fact that you had possessed a firearm when you were shot, right?
That is correct.
Okay. And this is, so to be fair, this is your testimony today and how this case turns out has an impact on your ability to try to collect your $10 million, right?
That's correct.
So if he's convicted, if Mr. Rittenhouse is convicted, your chance of getting $10 million is better, right?
I'm not entirely sure how that plays out.
So the introduction of this complaint opens with, "We appreciate you guys, we really do," in quotes, claiming that these were the words that law enforcement officers, words of encouragement and thanks, gave to Kyle Rittenhouse and his band of white nationalist vigilantes on August 25th, 2020. So right there in the beginning, page 1, we have a lie. I just want to point out that Kyle Rittenhouse's phone was downloaded not once, but 2 times. There were no ties at all whatsoever to any extremist organizations or anything like that. Kyle is not a white nationalist. This is made up. Gaige Grosskreutz is trying to play up the racism angle, despite the fact that Kyle Rittenhouse only shot white people on the night of Kenosha, and coincidentally, it wasn't just white random people, it was the white people that attacked him directly. Now, everything about this complaint is a complete and utter fraud, and I might have to take a live stream where I read through this in full and absolutely obliterate it, but point 3 about Gaige Grosskreutz being this peaceful protester on the night of August 25th, 2020 because of the pattern of racist behavior by the cops related to the Jacob Blake shooting is complete and utter trash and nonsense as well. First and foremost, Gaige Grosskreutz was illegally carrying a firearm, as he admitted to in a court of law. His concealed weapons permit expired, and if you'll remember, he was only shot after pointing that firearm at Kyle Rittenhouse's head without cause to do so, and reportedly, after the fact, his friend said that Gaige wished he would have murdered Kyle Rittenhouse in that situation. So it's a complete and utter lie that he was peacefully protesting. He was part of the rioters, and also there was no pattern of racist behavior. As we talked about, the police were called for Jacob Blake in the Jacob Blake situation. Jacob Blake had actually violated a restraining order against a woman who he sexually assaulted. By the way, he pled guilty to a lesser charge after the shooting of him to assaulting this person, and he beat up officers, then jumped in the car with a bunch of kids that he had no right to take in a rental car that was not his, and tried to take off. The police shot Jacob Blake because they didn't want to get into a high-speed pursuit with a dangerous individual armed with a knife who was going to kidnap children in order to avoid getting arrested on the felony warrant that he had, which was for that sexual assault. I've done multiple videos breaking this down, but it's really important to note that this is just not true. The Jacob Blake shooting was not motivated by evil white racism or anything like that. It was motivated by the fact that Jacob Blake was going to kidnap those black kids in the back of the car in a stolen rental car, and he showed up, violated a restraining order against a woman who charged him with sexual assault, a charge that he was a fugitive on. So everything about this so far, in just 3 sentences, 3 points in this lawsuit, is completely and utterly false. Now, point 4, by the way, is that there were all these racialized posts on social media, and many of these armed people were also posting these racist things on social media with the memes, the racist memes. So therefore, the police should have known that those people were evil white racists. By the way, I need to point out, nothing of the sort was ever connected in any way, shape, or form with Kyle. There was actually a lawsuit from the Huber family that tried to connect Kyle to the Kenosha Guard, and that particular lawsuit was dismissed because it had no merits. Now, they're doing another lawsuit from the family, but they can't take that angle because it's not supported by the facts, because Kyle never visited that Facebook page. He never had any interaction with them. And the idea that Gaige Grosskreutz is licensed to bring an illegal gun into a situation and point a gun at a 17-year-old's head and not face the consequences of that because someone else posted racialist memes on social media makes no sense at all. And it just goes to show you what we already knew, that this guy is a complete and utter schmuck, because he admitted on the stand that Kyle only shot him when he pointed a firearm at Kyle's head.
With your arms up in the air, he never fired, right?
Correct.
It wasn't until you pointed your gun at him, advanced on him, with your gun, now your hands down, pointed at him, that he fired, right?
Correct.
Now, point 6 of this lawsuit is completely and utterly amazing. If you had any doubts that Gaige Grosskreutz was absolutely worthless as a person, was an absolute complete and utter idiot, You just need to look at point 6. Let me read it for you. One of these armed individuals was defendant Kyle Rittenhouse, who was then 17 years old. He crossed into Wisconsin from Illinois carrying an assault rifle on the streets of Kenosha in open violation of the law. Yes, that is right. Gaige Grosskreutz, in his legal complaint, has said that Kyle Rittenhouse crossed state lines.
Wouldn't go out of his way to go to a protest, who crossed state lines. He drove from Illinois to Kenosha, Wisconsin. Now again, he drove from Illinois to Wisconsin. It's not like he was in his front yard and he was approached by a group of individuals who posed an imminent threat to his life. He drove across state lines in a state that he doesn't even live in, because obviously we're dealing with a 17-year-old from out of state, and then he crossed state lines with it. He crossed state lines, meaning he traveled across state lines. He traveled there from out of state, who again traveled across state lines. So he did not cross state lines with an illegal gun.
So here's the thing. This complaint was initially filed before the original Kyle Rittenhouse trial. This was a complaint against the Kenosha police and all of that. And you could say, you know what, there was a lot of misinformation out there. I had not fully memeified the cross state lines thing at that point in time, so you could be a complete and utter idiot for making this statement back then. But the thing is, this is an amended complaint, so we now know for a fact, as I said before, it's not even illegal to bring a gun across state lines in the United States of America. That's just a made-up thing because it sounds criminal to idiots. That Kyle actually did not cross state lines with this firearm. It was at his friend's house, and the reason he did that is because Kyle knew that he could carry this firearm in the state of Wisconsin because of a long gun exception to the law, but he could not own it in his own possession, and he couldn't bring it back to Illinois. This is one of the reasons why, by the way, the charges specifically related to the firearm were dismissed, because it came down to whether or not the gun was long enough to follow the long gun exception to the rule, and it turns out it did. So this wasn't even a charge that Kyle was acquitted on. This was a charge that was dismissed at trial because the law was actually on Kyle's side. And Kyle actually knew this, which is why he chose that firearm. And it turns out he knew the law better than the prosecutor, than Gaige Grosskreutz' lawyer. And this is even after the fact, because this is the amended complaint and they should know what happened in the trial. Now, there's also claims in this lawsuit that Kyle Rittenhouse and other individuals that were armed were deputized by law enforcement. Completely and utterly false, not supported by any evidence. And it also states that Kyle was indiscriminately firing at people throughout the course of the night. Again, this is just false and not supported by the video evidence. The people that Kyle Rittenhouse shot, Joseph Rosenbaum, who charged him, Kyle tried to run away from him, and then he actually got his hand on the gun, as supported by the DNA evidence, were attacking Kyle. Anthony Huber assaulted Kyle, then went for his firearm when Kyle was trying to run away towards the police. Gaige Grosskreutz, who pulled a gun on Kyle, faked a surrender, then tried to point the gun at him, was shot by Kyle. Jump Kick Man was trying to physically assault Kyle. Kyle fired upon him, but then when this guy ran away, Kyle didn't shoot on him. So Kyle was very precise in who and what he was shooting, and he only shot the number of shots that were necessary to get out of a situation, and did not take any retaliation strikes or anything like that. Kyle acted unbelievably disciplined in this scenario, despite the fact that he was 17 and his life was being threatened by all of these different criminals. I mean, Gaige Grosskreutz, who drove further than Kyle Rittenhouse in order to get to the scene of the crime — by the way, he's the criminal in the scene of the crime — actually claims that the police are responsible for not enforcing the curfew that they did not enforce against him. And by the way, the curfew was deemed unlawful later on, so there was no charge related to violating the curfew. That was a wrap because nobody actually had the authority to institute that curfew. I mean, this complaint is so absurd. I could just go through it and you'll just be laughing if you know anything about the case. Here's what Gaige says he was doing that night. Mr. Grosskreutz tried to end defendant Rittenhouse's homicidal rampage. Again, he attacked somebody and pulled a gun on him. Somebody who he admitted at trial told him he was going to the police.
No shots are fired, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the only information that you have is Mr. Rittenhouse saying, according to you, he pulled the gun on me first, right?
Correct.
And based on that, you believe there's an active shooter.
Not solely on that, but yes.
You don't have any information, correct?
I had minimal information.
And in fact, what he says to you was, I'm going to the police, correct?
That is correct.
And he's running toward the police, isn't he?
That is correct.
Okay. So and tell me if this is right. You have no idea what happened with Mr. Rosenbaum, do you?
Apart from, no. No.
On that day.
Correct.
Okay. And he tells you he's running, and he tells you whatever he tells you, I'm going to the police, or what you think is, he pulled the gun first, and he's running away from you, right? He's running north on Sheridan Road. Yes?
Correct.
And he's running away from where you're standing. True?
Correct.
You at that point pull a firearm out from your belt and begin to chase him.
The defendant, Rittenhouse, first killed Joseph Rosenbaum, an individual who confronted defendant Rittenhouse wandering the streets pointing a weapon of war at protesters. Defendant Rittenhouse shot him 4 times, including once in the head. Instead of rendering aid to Mr. Rosenbaum, defendant Rittenhouse fled. Defendant Rittenhouse's fleeing was all the more galling because he was standing only 200 yards from a hospital. So Joseph Rosenbaum attacked Kyle Rittenhouse. On video, went for his gun. Kyle tried to run away from Rosenbaum. He tried to avoid the conflict, but Rosenbaum lunged for the gun. Now, if you're open carrying a firearm and somebody's attacking you and going for your weapon, you have a moral responsibility to keep that firearm away from that person, even if that involves inflicting deadly force on that person. Also, Joseph Rosenbaum was a convicted felon, a 5-time child molester, if you want to look up what he actually did, meaning that he was a felon prohibited possessor, so it was actually illegal for him to go for Kyle Rittenhouse's gun. And even though Kyle didn't know this, he just had a moral obligation to prevent anybody from getting the gun, Rosenbaum most definitely knew that he wasn't allowed to possess this gun. So he chases down Kyle Rittenhouse on video, indisputable. We have multiple angles of this. Lunges for the gun. According to the DNA evidence, he got his hand on the firearm. So he's trying to take the firearm from Kyle, and Kyle shot him. And Gaige Grosskreutz says Kyle should have picked up this person who just finished attacking him and carried him 200 yards to the hospital. And this was galling to Gaige Grosskreutz. But you notice that Gaige didn't run towards Rosenbaum. He didn't run towards that situation to deal with it. Instead, he chased after Kyle, who's being attacked by a bunch of people, and then pulled the illegal gun that he possessed on him, which is all the more galling because Gaige, according to him at the trial, actually had real medic training, unlike Kyle Rittenhouse. But the lies get even worse. Point 15 says that Kyle Rittenhouse, while he was running away towards the police, was actively pointing his firearm at different protesters that were just standing around not doing anything. Again, I'll quote from it if you don't believe me. When the protesters saw him fleeing, they called for him to stop. He kept running, pointing his AR-15 at protesters as he ran. No, he didn't. One protester, a black man who watched defendant Rittenhouse kill Mr. Rosenbaum, chased Rittenhouse in an effort to protect others from the violence he had just watched at the hand of Rittenhouse. The individual did not have a weapon. The individual did not reach for Rittenhouse. His hands were in his pocket. Instead, he tried to kick Mr. Rittenhouse's weapon out of his hands. Mr. Rittenhouse fired his gun at this man 2 times. Mr. Rittenhouse tried to kill this man without any possible basis for believing his life was in danger. So, Jump Kick Man, who by the way is a convicted felon who won't even reveal his identity, that's how much of a thug and a criminal he is, sees Kyle Rittenhouse running. There's no evidence, by the way, that he was at the Rosenbaum scene at all. Like, that's just made up by Grosskreutz. Kyle gets hit from behind by these cowards as he's fleeing, not pointing his gun at anybody, gets knocked down, so this guy decides to kick him in his face. And I guess in one still, he had his hands in his pockets, so this guy's like, oh, he's not trying to disarm him at all. I mean, he's trying to stop him on a homicidal rampage, and obviously that would include disarming somebody, but he was just peacefully trying to kick him in the head. And then Kyle, for no reason at all, I mean, what's a head kick ever done to anybody, fires his gun at this person who's attacking him while he's on the ground when he was fleeing a situation, not threatening anyone. And of course, when that guy takes off, Kyle Rittenhouse leaves him alone. But what's even more crazy is that he characterizes Anthony Huber as seeing Kyle's homicidal intent and then going to disarm him. No mention of him hitting Kyle with the skateboard in the head before going for his gun. And again, we go to the complaint, number 22, having seen the intent to kill with his own eyes, Anthony Huber tried to disarm defendant Rittenhouse. Mr. Huber had heard Rittenhouse had already killed and watched him shoot an unarmed person, so Mr. Huber clearly understood that this was a violent individual. Defendant Rittenhouse shot Mr. Huber in the chest, killing him instantly. Plaintiff Gaige Grosskreutz watched all this happen. He approached with his hands in the air trying to ease the situation and stop the killing. Defendant Rittenhouse instead shot Mr. Grosskreutz in his bicep, leaving a gaping wound. Thankfully, Mr. Grosskreutz did not die that day. Now again, go watch the video for yourself. I've done multiple videos on this. Grosskreutz came in, gun in hand, hands up, faked a surrender, then went to move at him. You can see this on the video for yourself. He admitted to this at the trial, and then Kyle defended himself against Grosskreutz. So already the introduction, full of lies. Already we have the implication that Kyle's an evil white racist, a white supremacist. Again, totally false, totally made up. And we have key details like, the attacking of Kyle Rittenhouse being left out of this complaint. Also, we have weird characterizations throughout this that should not stand up to legal scrutiny, but unfortunately, this would cost Kyle Rittenhouse thousands upon thousands of dollars to defend himself against because this case wasn't dismissed outright, because apparently in the United States of America, even when you beat the case in a criminal context, even when you prove beyond any shadow of a doubt, and it's all caught on video, you defended yourself, you're vulnerable to these civil actions. You're vulnerable to scumbags like Gaige Grosskreutz trying to extract money from you. Kyle defended himself on video. It is easy to see. Everybody knows it, unless you're actively lying or you're willfully ignorant, or you're so hopped up on leftism, you know that Kyle Rittenhouse was 100% justified in the right, correct in his actions in the situation he was put in by these people. However, he's going to end up losing a ton of money paying for lawyers because we have a system that incentivizes litigating against people's actual rights. Gaige is claiming that Kyle violated his rights, that the police violated his rights, and all of that, when he was treated with kid gloves by the prosecution, because by all legal accounts, he was the aggressor with an illegal weapon, but because the prosecution is in the tank for the left, you end up in a situation where he was not charged properly. Kyle Rittenhouse had this faux trial that made no sense from the jump, and this is the situation that we're in. So I hope that Kyle wins, but you have to understand that even winning a lawsuit like this can end up making you a loser because you have to pay. It's not like getting legal fees and we have a loser pay system is particularly easy. People can take up these cases, hope for a settlement, and say, hey, we'll represent you, Gaige, for free. Gaige, because, we're friends. I call him Gaige because Gaige with the gauges. And don't worry about it unless we win and then get money. So you get this pro bono representation, and then all of a sudden you get Kyle to settle and the lawyer gets paid and Gaige gets paid. It's not a good situation. I'm not about it. I want this to be shut down, and we have to fight back against it. And Kyle has to actually stand up and defend himself against these cases and not take the easy way out and settle. Now, I do want to have Kyle Rittenhouse on a live stream to discuss this whole situation. I am working towards making that happen. Kyle, if you see this, definitely come back on, answer the Twitter DMs. I'll shoot you whatever message you need because we need to talk about this, understanding that there are limits to what you could talk about right now in this moment. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Again, support links are in the description of this video. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, show me by leaving a like. Subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social media. Support me via the support links in the description box of this video. This has been me talking about a frivolous lawsuit against Kyle Rittenhouse. Till next time.